basically on Class 3 and 4E land, we could argue that they ought to be used right here, except that we only use them where the slope length exceeds 300 feet. Slope length doesn't exceed 300 feet here, so we don't need those diversions. So whatever else we had, other controlling factors, if the slope length was greater than 300 feet, we'd still use diversions. Terraces, we don't fool with those. Write those off. Gully control, what you're looking for there is an active eroding gully greater than 12 inches deep going through the site that you're supposed to consider. Here you could argue that if we wanted you to consider the grass waterway here, there's some areas here where there are approaching some rills and some gullies. But basically they're controlled because they're all vegetated. So we would want to see them be active, 12 inches deep. Wind erosion, we talked about that. No-till, we talked about that. Permanent vegetation. When do you use permanent vegetation? Basically easy. When the land capability class, you decide what the land capability class is. If it's 5, 6, 7, or 8, you use permanent vegetation. Same thing applies to item C, most intensive land use. If it's class 5, 6, 7, or 8, we don't cultivate class 5, 6, 7, or 8. So the answer up there is permanent vegetation. If it's land capability class 1 through 4, then you got to make a decision whether it's intertilled crops, continuous, so on and so forth. In this case, since it came out capability class 4E, we wanted here intertilled crops less than 1/2 of the time. So that was the answer we were looking for. Class 2, Class 3 soils, E. We would look for intertilled crops 1/2 or more of the time. On flat soils, whether they be sandy or wet or whatever, we would use intertilled crops continuous or intertilled crops with irrigation if they were both the topsoil and the subsoil were coarse texture. Alright, that brings me to supplemental nutrients and amendments. We give you the pH. At this particular site, we gave you a pH of 5.8. So, do I need lime?
Yes.
The magic number there is 6.5. The pH is less than 6.5, you need lime. Nitrogen. How do we do nitrogen?
If it's medium or low.
The important point is, it's not based on whatever you're sitting in or what's growing around you right now. It's based on the crop that we give you on the information sign. That's what you're making recommendations for. And the bottom line is, on legumes, we do not put nitrogen. On everything else we do. So in this case, we just indicated grasses, so you would have checked nitrogen for this site. You would not need nitrogen for what? Soybeans, alfalfa, clover, peas, locust trees. That's all I know. I'm losing. All right. How about our nutrients? Phosphorus, potassium, and magnesium. When do you need them?
If they're low or medium?
When they're medium, when they're low, or when they're very low. Medium, low, or very low. That's when you'd use phosphorus, potassium, magnesium. I'd also caution you, or have we straightened this out, that the name of the nutrient's different on the information sign than it is on the sheet?
Yes. Potash one there. Potassium on the sheet.
Does everybody know the connection? Phosphorus and phosphate, assume that's the same thing. Potash and potassium are the same thing. Alright, how about for non-farm interpretations? Home sites with basements. When you do these items, be sure to skip down. Don't do the first one, the limitations first. Skip down and do the major limiting factors. That's what you got to decide. If there's no major limiting factors, then certainly it's slight. So we look down at this, major limiting factors for basements, high water table depth, bedrock, flooding or ponding, and slope. The only thing you should have checked here was slope, because the slope was greater than 8%. On these interpretations, with regard to slope, 0 to 8 is slight, 8 to 15 is moderate, greater than 15% slope is severe. Okay? Flooding or ponding, for goodness sakes, if you put anything on the sign that says frequent, occasional, rare flooding, you check flooding down here and that's automatically a severe limitation for a home site. Automatic. Depth of bedrock, if the depth of bedrock is anything other than see? That's real. I'm losing it. It's all right. It's okay. If it's greater than 60 inches to bedrock, it rates slight. If the depth of bedrock is 40 to 60, that is deep, it would rate moderate. If it's less than 40 inches to bedrock, that is moderate deep, shallow, very shallow, it would rate severe. In this case, it's very deep. Keep in mind now, what you see at the bottom of the hole, you presume that same condition that you see extends to beyond any critical depths. In this case, you have to assume that it extends to beyond 72 inches. High water table, basically the same thing there. If the gray models come in above 40 inches, that's a severe rating. If they come in between 40, well, it's really 40 and 72, that's a moderate rating. If it's deeper than 72, it's not a limiting factor, it's slight. So, you have to go down through these, and if none of them apply, then come up above and check none to slight. If you've checked anything down below, then you should at least check moderate or severe up above. Same criteria applies to septic systems, except we have the added benefit of permeability. Permeability, if it's either rapid or slow, you would check permeability as a limiting factor, and the limitation would be severe. The argument is, if permeability is slow, the effluent's not going to move fast enough, it's going to accumulate, come to the top, and that's a real problem. On the other hand, if the permeability is rapid, very sandy soil, the effluent's going to seep through too fast, pollute your groundwater, and you'll recycle it through your well. There's the bottom line. I'm sure you all wanted to know that today. Pardon?
Did you check the slope for the septic tanks?
Absolutely. At this site,
even if it doesn't make it severe? Because the slope really makes it moderate. The permeability makes it severe. Did you still mark slope?
correct. Good point. Good point. In this case, you see the slope gently sloping. You would check it down here. It's a limiting factor, but it only makes the limitation moderate. And as the lady indicated, the permeability takes the final limitation to severe. Good. Thank you. All right, how about lawns and shrubs? First thing we look at, surface soil texture. I would remind everybody when we're talking about this surface soil texture, you kind of got to look down below in the rest of those columns. On the second line down, it says coarse or gravelly. That means the surface layer. We're talking about the surface layer now. If it's gravelly, we interpret that to mean greater than 15% gravel, then that would be a limitation. In this case, there's some gravel there. You can see those coastal plain gravel, but they're not greater than 15%. So in this case, it would have been based on the surface texture of moderately coarse. Slight would have been the interpretation. Under slope and erosion, again, level to gently sloping or strongly sloping, that would have given you a moderate, except at this site, past erosion is severe. If you look down at the bottom, it says, or severe erosion. What I do, I'd recommend you do this, is go over on this left-hand side and circle the item first, and then come across and correlate what interpretation you want. See, with this severe erosion, that throws the overall site evaluation to severe. Then when we look at available water capacity, of course that was low. We come over, that gives you a moderate limitation. Due to the sandy nature and ability to hold water to